Welcome to the HomeX, the Homebuyer Experience Podcast, where we share with you real-life stories of real people achieving homeownership today. On this episode, I have my friend Vice, who also has his own podcast called the Brew Inn Podcast. And if you have a chance, feel free to check him out on all different platforms. He shares his story of achieving homeownership and what it was like for him and his partner to purchase a home before they were married. My guest today is a longtime friend and collaborator. We're in a rap group together. I guess you could call it a duo. We've also started a clothing brand, and it's awesome to see just the different projects that he's into right now and what he does for his community. My guest today is my friend Vice. Vice, thank you for hopping on today's podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Could you just share a little bit about, what you do now and kind of the projects that you're into?
Okay. Well, I'm a community partner. I work in the social services field. Right now, I spearhead a LGBTQ wellness center and also a rapid housing program that serves countywide, where we provide rental subsidies to our homeless young adults. Outside of work, I'm in the podcast space, small business owner, the Brew Inn Podcast, and the Brew Inn Clothing.
Now, this venture in terms of, going into the Brew Inn Podcast, like what really motivated that, and, what's the passion there coming from?
Well, I think the passion there, so this happened during the pandemic, right? It came to a point where I was trying to figure out, like, man, everyone's starting to do some, like, figure out like hobbies and what they're interested in, and I really took a moment to look around, like, what could I do? Like, I don't garden, I don't create things. And so I looked at my room and I was like, dude, I grew up loving streetwear, like shoes, clothing. And then I was just like, you know what, let me get out of my comfort zone. And then I was like, let me try to model some of this stuff, like just, like you see like some of the social media influencers where they're like in the streets and whatever locations. And I was like, you know what, let me just hit up my buddies that did photography, videography, that's Art and BFig, shout out to them. And let me just try this. Like, let's do this once a month, right? And we just started doing this once a month, and it got to the point where we're in the pandemic having real felt conversations, laughing and doing all this stuff, going on trips to the desert, to LA. And then it got to the point where like, why aren't we documenting this? Why aren't we recording this? And we're like, dude, we should start a podcast. A year later out, here we are now, episode 6.
I was listening to your 4th episode on the way down here, and dude, man, like I was literally all smiles on a 1-hour commute. So appreciate you, Art and Brian, providing the entertainment there, and your guys' insights are definitely hilarious, man. Yeah. So definitely give it a listen if you guys have a chance. Find them on what platforms for your podcast?
On all platforms for the podcast. You just put in the Brew Inn Podcast with the spaces in between, and you'll find us.
So obviously we're here to talk about home ownership. You and your wife, now your wife. Congrats once again.
Thank you.
How many years has it been since you guys bought?
I think it's year 1 only.
Year 1, right?
Yeah, year 1 and a few months.
Nice. But to be honest, like from the real estate space, man, it was that's such a huge accomplishment just to buy your first property, especially during that time. Mm-hmm. And so I want to dive deeper into that experience, just to share with people, like how that process went about for you guys, So for you, Nadine, like what really started off like your journey to look into purchasing your first home?
We weren't actually looking. So during the pandemic, before the pandemic, I moved home from Escondido back to Mira Mesa with my parents, and then the pandemic hit. And so I was stuck in my room, right? Me and Nadine started dating, and a lot of my work from home experience was, in my childhood bedroom. And it got to the point where like, all right, well, what are we going to do next? Our relationship got a little serious after that. And we're like, oh, should we rent? Like, and we're looking at Costamere View, like off the 15, right? And I was like, do we want to spend that much money to someone else when we can invest? And so the first thing we looked at, we started going on like sites like Redfin, and we're like, all right, let's look for a home closer to home. Like Mira Mesa has been our hometown, and so that's when we started looking at houses here, and then looking at Poway, looked all the way to Temecula and even Oceanside, until we got onto a list for new builds, and then we got our home.
You brought up one thing there, right? Like obviously you guys were in a serious relationship. You started, looking at the rent in the area and how much you would pretty much pay someone else, right? How'd you guys even get to that point in terms of the maturity to understand, like, man, we're getting serious, we're gonna live together, we're looking at rent, rent looks bonkers. Like, how did you arrive to that maturity? Like, hey, maybe we should just check out what this home ownership process even looks like for us.
I think for us, we were looking at our age, right? Our first thing is our age. We were in our mid 30s, early 30s, and we're like, our next steps, it has to be serious. I'm not here to waste any more time, right? And so you start looking at things as investments, because, like I said, I didn't want to pay 2,000 plus to someone else to have us not own anything, right? I felt like it was just throwing or burning money faster. And so it really came down to having some real hard conversations of like, all right, well, what's the plan? What's the end goal, right? Where do we see ourselves? Do we see ourselves getting married one day? Because we were married at the time too. That came later as well. And so we actually purchased a home before we got married, because we're like, that's the biggest goal, and to find a place closer to our families.
I think that's more common nowadays for couples to purchase a home before even getting married. Could you just give us a little insight, like, how was that in having that conversation of purchasing a home before you were married? Like, what points did you guys hit that really, for you guys to come to terms to be okay with doing that and moving forward?
I think that came with a lot of trust, right? Because buying a home is way bigger than buying a ring to give someone. Sure. And so we looked at even like, how are we going to tell our parents too? Like, this is a big move. Usually that's something like, especially for our culture, they'll shake their heads at before marriage. So we really have to sit down with, at the end of the day, what do we want? We got to stop figuring out what other people or what expectations other people have on us, and what, like, what are the next steps. We put our goal out there, and it's like, all right, what are the next steps to get us there? Nice. And so that's how we got into really like, all right, if this looks feasible, what can we do now to prep us for our end goal?
So really what it sounds like, it was a timing thing.
Yes,
it was a maturity
definitely.
thing, right? And then even just to have the conversation before marriage about, having such a huge commitment shows the maturity level that you guys had in your relationship, right, to move forward with that. In terms of buying a new build versus like existing home, how did you guys make that decision?
I mean, we were looking at Mira Mesa, the houses that we were able to afford, right? Or that were realistic to us were a lot of the older models. And we were thinking about, all right, well, like, what should we look at as, an investment? Do we want to spend more money, like fixing old pipes and, renovating? Like, are we going to be living in a house where we're renovating it for like 5 years? Like, are we going to love the house that we're going to be in? And it came down to opportunity. I think going the new build route, we knew we were going to get the house with a backyard, or even a front yard, right? And or a place that was detached from other homes. And so we were like, all right, well, this is not going to be our forever home. Like, what do we want in the moment? And so, like, there was things that we were willing to give up, like the pros and cons. And one of the things we weren't ready to give up is being closer to our family. And so when that opportunity for price point and proximity came about, we were just like, all right, well, we're not going to get our house with our picket fence and all that stuff. Yeah. Let's invest in this townhome to start.
Absolutely. I think that's a very common thing. Christine and I, we're also homeowners. And if you ask me, and I share this all the time, like, if you asked me 5 years ago, would you see yourself living in Temecula? My answer would be no. Like, no. Yeah. Right. But now fast forward 5 years later, like, I love it, dude. I love being out there. But, in order to make that decision, we had to, I don't want to say concede, but we definitely had to settle a little bit. Yeah. And sometimes when you settle, you might find your blessings, right? Especially when you factor in time, you might be able to, start to see the fruits of that decision eventually, right? So, going into buying the new home, right? How did you guys, or even starting the process, can you recall what your initial, I guess, impressions were about the process?
So I mean, for a first time home buyer, the process is a lot. There's a lot that you have to know. So um, it came down to asking for help. So we reached out to my sister and brother-in-law first, and we are like, what are some recommendations? What should we look out for? And they said, hey, you need to have a good team to build around, especially because you're investing in a property that's hundreds of $1,000s, and you want that good first experience too, and people that you trust. So for us to even start, it was identifying people that we trusted, and the two people were, the real estate agent and then the loan officer, which is you. Yeah, and like I said, I've known you for like the longest time. One thing that was important to us, and I remember having this conversation with Nadine, it's someone that we can definitely trust, and someone that looks like us and that can look out for us at the end of the day. And that's why it's like, for you, this is not, this wasn't a decision based off the now. It's looking down long term, because like I said, this is not going to be a forever home, and we need someone that can be in our corner at the end of the day. And so it was a real big decision. And so we're like, all right, let's get Chris, let's get Lonnie, and here we are, a year later.
Appreciate that, man. Once again, dude, like, thank you guys so much for the trust that you had in me to help you guys in that process. It definitely was a huge blessing. And I think for me on my end, right, and maybe this is just something internally that I had to struggle with, was like, okay, like, how are my friends going to view me and helping them in this capacity? Did you feel that at all, like during that process when you were, dealing with conversations about finances and talking loan terms and whatnot?
Not really, because I mean, I think you're in this space, and working with you, I felt like you were comfortable too, and I felt like your intentions were great. Where you're not here to just make an extra buck, but you're, like you told us from the get go, whether you're with me or someone else, like, we just want to make sure that you're good. Like, we want to give you the tools so that you know what to do going forward. And so you didn't put a lot of pressure, and I like that, because it didn't feel like it was car salesman, type of feeling. So like I said, it came down to all of that, and I think that was like a good move that we made.
And that's pretty cool that you got the confirmation from your sister, right, to point you in that direction. Like, hey, the people that you're going to choose to work with, make sure that you trust them. And then obviously one of the criteria is that they look like you guys, right? And I think some of the times, some first time home buyers, like, they may know some agents or some lenders that are friends and family, and they might shy away from it. So I think that's great advice. But also, I think what you did bring up during that is like, okay, like, do they really have like my best interest in heart, and are they professional, right? What other challenges did you guys face in preparing for homeownership?
There was a lot of paperwork, a lot of reading. It was pretty lengthy. But like, there was terms that we did not know, and I felt like I would always reach out to you at any time of the day, and you would answer. Like, and there was moments where I was like, I'm respectful of your time, but like, a lot of some of the items where there was like this deadline that we had to meet. I felt like everything was straightforward. You gave us a list to look at to help prep us, things that we did not even think about, or things that we need to look a little bit closer. And I felt like if we didn't go to you guys for that guidance, I think that's the biggest part, is that guidance, then we probably wouldn't be prepared.
Can you recall like any of the certain items that you felt like were just tough to prepare for?
I think the biggest thing that's tough to prepare for is your credit score, right? When you told us credit score, savings, like, I felt like there was options that you drew out with price points. It was like A through C, and it depends on what we wanted to do along with the interest rates that we're looking at. If you didn't tell us ahead of time, like, I probably wouldn't be working on a lot of that stuff. Like, for me, I remember Cameron, he was talking about his credit score. Like, when I heard about all of that, I was like, okay, I got to double down. I got to pay off some of my, some of my items, and square away a couple things, and like it really came down to timing, because we got our place phase 3, and if it wasn't for where we got it and when we got it, I don't know if we would get that. We would be here right now. We would probably be further along, and paying even more down the line.
After going through the process and now being successful homeowners today, reflecting back at it, like how has your impression changed about the process at all?
I think reflecting back, it gave us opportunity, and it gave us opportunity to grow. There's things that we learned individually and as a couple that we knew we needed to work on. And so I think that helped us to where we're at right now.
Well, I mean, so in the things to get squared away, like what kind of things were you having to square away?
Finances was like one of the biggest things. Finances, savings, credit score, learning how to switch up the way we were living, right? It was less, and I remember talking to you about this, and I was like, because I knew it would come to the point where you check all my savings and everything and my checkings, and I was like, sorry, Chris, like you might see a bunch of cotillons receipt. And so we even cut down eating out. So things like that, making these adjustments for the time being, so that we can get into to this home.
But you know what, man, like, cause that's one thing that I think that's very important in the process is helping clients drill down a monthly budget, right? Because then, like you said, nobody really teaches us how to manage our finances. A lot of the times when we learn about our finances, it comes from what we learn in the kitchen table or what we learn from our parents, right? Because, that's 18 years of programming. We see how they handle their finances, and it may be a good thing or it may be a bad thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, in making that sacrifice, in adjusting your lifestyle in order to achieve home ownership, would you say was it worth it for you guys?
Oh, definitely worth it.
How so?
It took me to like I said, I was living out of my parents' or my old childhood room. And it took me to a place where I had this vision of like, if I had the space, this is what I can build down the line with my career. And so like with this sacrifice, I knew I had to cut back on a lot of these things, but it was like, is it worth it at the end of the day when you can't see it now? And looking at it now, I'm just like, dude, I can't even believe I'm in a space like this.
That's so, man, that's so, I think, profound, the way that you put it, right? Like, is it worth it for me to give up the immediate pleasures for the long-term benefit? Yeah. How did you build up that maturity to make that decision when it came to home ownership?
Well, it comes down to like, well, what's important, right? I told you I love clothing, streetwear, all that stuff. I didn't buy any shoes for like the longest time. I'll put that aside. Some of the places, like I didn't eat out a lot. Yeah. And so missing cotillons, right? But it came down to like, is your dream bigger than, the stuff that you want right now? And spending your money on things that you could get later down the road, like, is that something that you want to, you want to sacrifice? Like, it's like home, you can get shoes right now. Like, no, like this is the bigger goal for us. And having those conversations, it's like, it's at the end of the day, it's us. So it's like, there's another person attached to it.
Mm-hmm. So it was more like a maturity thing then, right?
And discipline.
It's so tough,
that's
man.
The hardest part.
I feel like maturity and discipline comes with time. So Vice, I mean, what tips would you give other people that are wanting to get their first home?
Save at an early age, put something away. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things. If I could go into a DeLorean and go back in time, like I would tell my past self that, savings is important. Your credit score, keep your credit score up or keep working at it. Don't max out your credit cards and do dumb stuff. Like, I felt like that was a lot of my 20s, and I'm learning like the hard way now. Like, I could have been, my credit score could have been a little bit better, and then really have like that sit down, like list what you're looking for in a first home, what you're willing to give up. There's always sacrifice, and what's your budget. Identify the two people that are on your team, or if it's a third or whoever you have to reach out to. Don't feel like you can do all of this by yourself. Like, ask for help. Keep asking for help. I think that's the hardest thing to do, because we're like, oh, we're grown-ups and whatever the case is. But I'm like, no, I need people that have been there to show me all of this stuff. And also too, whether it's new home, whether it's a secondary home, like, build out options, because this home right now, this was actually our second option. We actually wanted to get the other models, but we realized it didn't fit our budget the way that this market rose. So those are the things just to look at, but really sit down with a lender, a real estate agent that looks out for you and your best interests, and what is the intent, and what's a long-term goal for them. Like, do you see this? Look at it as, do you see this person like they're your family? Like, down the road, do you feel like they're going to be a part of your life? I think that's one of the biggest things. We're making this investment, so that means you got to invest in a person as well, too.
No, absolutely, man. So would you say that's like your filter? That was your filtering mechanism when finding the people that you were deciding to work with? Like, hey, is this person going to be in my life for a good period of time?
Yeah. I think it came down to that, and everything else that I've talked about.
Yeah, that's what's up, man. Thanks, bro. So, I mean, thank you again, Vice, for being on the podcast. Really appreciate you. Really quick, where can people find you? Where can they tune in to listen to more of your podcast and follow you on social?
Linktree.com/the Brew Inn Podcast, the Brew Inn Podcast on Instagram. And we'll see Chris on a future episode when we're ready to have guests and pick his braid.
Appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, thanks,
Cheers.
man.